Hi, welcome to my next video. This time I would like to show you the next part in the series about making my upcoming book Tokyo at Night. This is actually the 5th big illustration I did for the book, and right now I'm at illustration number 24, so only 6 illustrations to go. And I think this was one of the most difficult pieces I did for the book so far, also because this was a double page spread. So first, of course, I did a really small sketch, a thumbnail, to decide what I should do for the whole piece, and then I had to cut the watercolor paper to size and tape 2 pieces of this paper together. I'm using here the Canson Moulin watercolor paper. This is a 300 grams cold pressed watercolor paper, and I had a bit of a problem to buy bigger pieces, bigger sheets of this paper, but because it works really well with the ink I'm using here with the Sailor waterproof ink, I chose to use this paper either way, and I'm connecting 2 smaller sheets of paper, but it doesn't matter so much because the connection line will be in the gutter of the book, so in between the pages. And also, to be safe, I tried to erase the connection line in Photoshop in post-production, so even if the connection is printed on the page, it should not be visible. The next steps were, of course, drawing the sketch with a light pencil, so I'm using a pencil that's really easy to erase, and then doing the lines with the waterproof Sailor ink using my LAMY fountain pen. With pieces as big as this one, I feel lucky if I manage to do the sketch and then trace it with the fountain pen in one day. It usually takes a bit longer than that. When the lines are traced and complete and dry, I erase everything with a mono eraser and then check twice if I didn't miss any spots. The next step, of course, is painting with the watercolors. I'm using here my Schmincke watercolor set, and if you want to know more about it, you can read more on my website in the tools section. For a big piece like this, with not so much visible sky and a lot of building details and reflections and things that you have to consider and be careful about, the coloring process usually progresses really slowly and can take a lot of time and patience, and finishing a picture like this can take more than 4 days. For painting this scene, I started with the brightly lit staircase. I wanted to start with the brightest colors with the lightest tones and progress from there to the darker reflections in the windows, the insides of the buildings, the station in the back, and to the dark buildings in the far back. The reflections in the windows were one of the hardest parts in this picture. I wanted to do them properly, so I looked really hard at the reference pictures and tried to recreate the reflections with just watercolor paint. I used a bit of help from the masking fluid to paint over the brightest spots so I can focus on other elements, and I don't have to worry that I'll forget the brightest spots and I'll accidentally paint over them in one of the steps. I find that painting reflections can be really time consuming and does require a lot of concentration, but when done properly step by step, the reflections will look good in the final picture. I think that, at least in my painting style, the reflections are an element that does not work well with cutting corners and doing things roughly, and maybe it will work out alright. Planning ahead and deliberate painting step by step, going forward as planned, is the best method for me, I think, to do reflections, even though sometimes it's a daunting task. It takes a long time and you cannot see the result and what you are aiming for until you paint, I don't know, about 80-90% of the whole thing. So you have to kind of paint while trusting the process and your own experience that the result will be okay. In this piece, the reflection of the station platform that's on the right side in the windows of the building that's on the left side were really important, so I didn't want to mess this thing up. I took my time and I think it paid off. When I had the bright front part ready, I could progress to coloring the buildings in the back. I used dark colors to pump up the contrast between the front and the back parts. This contrast was what originally sparked my interest in this scene. I wanted to recreate this feeling of loneliness and empty space beyond. This peculiar atmosphere similar to science fiction movies with brightly lit white corridors of empty space stations with the black space beyond. This is more or less the image that I had in my head all the time when I was painting this picture, and the overall atmosphere I was aiming for while making this piece. I think it's really important to have a general image or a keyword or something that you're aiming for while painting scenery, so you're not only painting some buildings, but you're trying to convey a certain feeling or an idea that you have in your head with them. Okay, so here is how the final picture looks like after a bit of addition in Photoshop. I also erased the line marking the connection between the two sheets of watercolor paper that I used for this picture. Okay, and you can actually already pre-order the Tokyo at Night book on Japanese Amazon if you want. I'll link it below. That's it for this video. I hope you liked it. As always, feel free to comment, share and subscribe, and you can also support me on Patreon. See you in the next one. Bye!